Story 1. When James and Emily Carter finally bought their first home, it felt like a dream come true. A quiet suburban street in Ohio, kids riding their bikes, freshly cut lawns, and that peaceful, all-American calm they had longed for. But sometimes, dreams can curdle into nightmares. The Carters had barely finished unloading their moving truck when they noticed him. Standing at the edge of his yard was a man in his late 50s. Tall, lean, with neatly combed gray hair and a smile that seemed just a little too wide. His name, as they would soon learn, was Mr. Harlan, the man who lived next door. He walked over slowly, his shoes crunching against the gravel, and extended a hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said warmly, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. James shook his hand, but something about Harlan's grip, tight, lingering, sent a shiver crawling down his spine. Emily, ever the polite one, smiled and thanked him. But her eyes flickered for just a second, as if she too felt that quiet wrongness in the air. Over the next few days, Harlan was everywhere. When Emily checked the mailbox, he was there, waving. When James took out the trash, there he was, trimming his hedge. Even late at night, when they drew the curtains in the living room, James swore he saw Harlan standing by his own window, staring back. At first, they told themselves it was just a friendly neighbor being overly curious. But things escalated quickly. On their third night, Emily woke to the sound of faint tapping on glass. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. The sound came again, tap, tap, tap. It was coming from their living room window. James, half asleep, grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs. He flicked on the light, yanked the curtains open, and saw nothing. Just the empty yard, swaying branches, the faint glow of Harlan's house across the street. But when James leaned closer, his stomach dropped. On the glass was the outline of a handprint. Cold, damp, and pressed against the outside. James backed away, every hair on his body standing on end. Emily whispered from the stairs, "Was someone out there?" James didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he already knew who had been standing at that window. Watching. Waiting. And this was only the beginning. Sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't hiding in the woods. They're living right next door. The next morning, James and Emily tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a kid playing a prank, or maybe their minds were still adjusting to the new house. But as the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, the unease crept back in. Because when darkness fell, so did the feeling of being watched. Emily stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes when she froze. From the corner of her eye, she saw it again, movement. She turned her head slowly toward the window above the sink. Across the yard, standing motionless in the shadows of his porch, was Mr. Harlan. He wasn't waving this time. He wasn't smiling. He was just staring. Emily's hands trembled as she reached to switch off the light. But before she could, Harlan lifted his hand, slowly, and pressed a single finger to his lips. A chilling gesture, shoo! Emily stumbled backward, her breath caught in her throat. When James came into the kitchen, Harlan was gone. But the unease lingered like smoke. The Carters tried to ignore it, but over the following week, things got worse. They started hearing footsteps in their yard at night. The sound of leaves crunching. Gravel shifting. But every time James rushed outside with his flashlight, the yard was empty. One night, Emily woke to the sound of their back gate creaking open. She sat up in bed, her chest pounding. She could hear it, footsteps moving across the lawn, slow, deliberate. James grabbed the baseball bat he kept under the bed and bolted to the back door. He swung it open. The yard was empty. The gate hung wide open. James stepped out, flashlight beam sweeping across the grass. His voice cracked as he shouted into the night. "Who's out there?" No answer. Only silence. But just as James turned to go back inside, the beam of his flashlight landed on something. Pinned to the wooden fence with a rusty nail was a Polaroid picture. And in that picture was Emily, taken through the window of their home. James' blood ran cold. He rushed back inside, locked every door, every window, and showed Emily the photo. She broke down, her hands covering her face, whispering over and over, "He's watching us, he's watching us." That night, they barely slept. Every creak of the house, every brush of wind against the shutters, made them jump. And in the small hours of the morning, James finally admitted what they were both thinking. "This isn't random. It's him. It's Harlan." Emily whispered back, "But why? What does he want?" The next evening, James decided to test his theory. He waited in the dark living room with the lights off, staring out the window at Harlan's house. Hours passed. Midnight came. And then, there he was. Harlan. Standing in his own yard, facing their house, his face just visible in the glow of the street lamp. He wasn't moving. He wasn't blinking. He was just standing there, watching. And James realized with dawning horror. This wasn't a friendly neighbor. This was a predator. And predators don't stop watching until they're ready to strike. By the third week in their new home, James was at his breaking point. The sleepless nights, the Polaroid, the endless staring, he couldn't take it anymore. Emily begged him to call the police. But James knew what would happen. Harlan would smile, shake their hands, play the role of the friendly old neighbor, and the cops would leave. And then, things would only get worse. So James made a decision. If the police couldn't stop Harlan, then he'd have to uncover the truth himself. Late one evening, when Harlan's house went dark, James slipped outside. He crept along the fence, flashlight in hand, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Emily had begged him not to go, but he couldn't live another night not knowing what Harlan was hiding. When James reached Harlan's backyard, the air felt heavier. The grass was overgrown, weeds twisting through cracked concrete. He moved carefully, each step crunching against broken branches. And then he saw it. A bulkhead door leading down into a basement. The padlock on it was old, rusted, almost begging to be broken. James hesitated, his hand trembling as he touched the lock. He shouldn't be here. But then he remembered the Polaroid nailed to his fence. That was all the reason he needed. With a brick from the yard, he smashed the lock. The sound echoed through the night. He froze, holding his breath, listening. Silence. Slowly, he pulled the doors open. The smell hit him first. Damp. Mold. And something else, metallic, sharp, like old blood. He aimed his flashlight down the steps, and his stomach twisted. The basement was lined with shelves. And on those shelves, dozens of Polaroid photos. Photos of Emily. Photos of James. Photos of the previous homeowners. And then, photos of people James didn't recognize. Families. Children. Faces frozen in fear. Some of the photos were decades old. James staggered backward, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't just obsession. This was something far worse. As he moved deeper, he found a table in the center of the room. On it sat an old tape recorder, a stack of cassette tapes neatly labeled with dates. His hands shaking, James pressed play on the top tape. At first, just static. Then, a voice. Harlan's voice. Calm. Measured. Whispering. Day 142. She doesn't know I'm watching. She never does. Tonight, she closed the curtains early, but that won't stop me. Nothing ever does. James' blood turned to ice. Suddenly, James heard a noise upstairs. A floorboard creaking. His flashlight snapped toward the sound. Someone was in the house. His heart hammered as he killed the light, plunging the basement into darkness. He held his breath, straining to listen. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Descending the stairs. James wasn't alone. And the man who lived next door had finally caught him. James' heart pounded so hard he thought it might give him away. The basement was pitch black, save for the faint glow of moonlight seeping through a tiny window. And the footsteps, they were getting closer. Sound cue, wooden steps creaking slowly, echoing in the dark. James gripped the baseball bat he'd brought with him, his knuckles white. Then, a voice. Low. Calm. Terrifyingly familiar. James. I didn't think you'd be the curious type. It was Harlan. James' flashlight lay useless at his feet, but he didn't need to see Harlan's face to know he was smiling. He could hear it in his voice. You shouldn't be here, Harlan said softly. This isn't for you. James' voice shook. What the hell is all this? The pictures, the tapes, what are you doing? Harlan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. You wouldn't understand. They never do. James raised the bat, trying to sound braver than he felt. You stay the hell away from us. If you ever come near Emily again. But Harlan cut him off. Oh, Emily, she's perfect, isn't she? The way she brushes her hair back before she shuts the blinds, the way she bites her lip when she thinks no one is watching. James felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just obsession. This was predation. He lunged forward, swinging the bat. Harlan moved faster than expected, dodging into the shadows. The two men collided, crashing into shelves, Polaroids fluttering down like snow. James fought wildly, fueled by terror and rage. He managed to shove Harlan back, the older man slamming into the wall. For a moment, James thought he had the upper hand. Until Harlan smiled again. You think you're the first, James? The others thought they could stop me too. James froze. The others? But before he could press him, Harlan lunged with surprising strength, knocking the bat from James' hands. They struggled, their breaths ragged, until James' fingers brushed against something on the table. The tape recorder. He grabbed it and swung it as hard as he could. The heavy metal corner cracked against Harlan's temple. Harlan staggered, dazed. James didn't wait. He bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind him and jamming a chair under the handle. James collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. Emily ran to him, her face pale. James, what happened? He grabbed her by the shoulders. Call the police. Now. Emily dialed with shaking hands, but before the dispatcher could answer, a thunderous bang rattled the basement door. Then another. Harlan was trying to break free. James grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her toward the front door. But as they reached it, they froze. Through the frosted glass window of the door, Harlan's face appeared. Blood running down his temple. Eyes wide. Grinning. Emily screamed as James threw the deadbolt, holding the door shut with all his strength. The sound of sirens finally pierced the night, growing louder, closer. Red and blue lights washed over the house as police cars screeched to a stop outside. Officers stormed the yard, guns drawn, shouting commands. When they burst through the door, Harlan was gone. The yard. The street. The shadows. Empty. Only the basement remained, filled with the evidence of his twisted obsession. The Carters never saw Harlan again. The police searched for months, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. And yet, even now, on quiet nights, Emily swears she still feels his eyes on her. Watching. Waiting. From the house next door. This is the end of Story 1. Story 2. When Sarah Miller signed the lease for her new apartment in Chicago, she thought she had finally found her escape. After a messy breakup and months of couch surfing, the two-bedroom unit on the third floor felt like a fresh start. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Her own little slice of peace. But peace doesn't last forever. The landlord, Mr. Jenkins, handed her the keys with a warning. Place is quiet. Tenants keep to themselves. Just don't mind the guy upstairs. He's lived here forever. Keeps odd hours. But he's harmless. Sarah brushed it off. Everyone had quirks, right? The first week was uneventful. She decorated the living room, stocked her fridge, and even started sleeping better than she had in months. But then, the noises started. It was always after midnight. The sound of footsteps pacing back and forth. Slow. Heavy. Relentless. Sometimes a dragging sound, like furniture being pulled across the floor. Other times, something sharper. Like a chair toppling over. Or a body hitting the ground. At first, Sarah assumed it was normal apartment living. Thin walls, creaky floors. She even laughed about it to a coworker. But one night, around 3 a.m., she woke to something different. It wasn't pacing. It wasn't dragging. It was knocking. 3 slow knocks. Directly above her bed. Sarah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared up at the ceiling, heart pounding, waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. The knocks came again. And again. She grabbed a broom and banged back in frustration. For a moment, silence. Then, softly, chillingly, someone knocked back. The next morning, Sarah cornered her landlord in the hallway. "Look, the guy upstairs, he kept me up all night. Can you please talk to him?" Mr. Jenkins frowned. "Upstairs?" He hesitated. "That unit's been empty for years." Sarah blinked. "No, that's impossible. I hear him every night." The landlord shook his head. "I don't know what you're hearing, but no one's lived up there since 2010. It's sealed shut. Pipes froze, ceiling collapsed. Whole place is condemned." Sarah felt her stomach twist. If the apartment above was empty, then who, or what, was pacing her ceiling every night? Sometimes, the scariest neighbors aren't the living ones. Sarah couldn't shake the sound of those knocks. They echoed in her mind all day at work, every hollow thud reminding her that something was very wrong in that building. The landlord's words haunted her. No one's lived up there since 2010. If that was true, then who was pacing her ceiling every night? That night, Sarah sat awake in the dark, listening. The clock ticked past midnight. Then it started again. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. Directly above her. Her chest tightened as she grabbed her phone, turning on the flashlight. She couldn't just sit there anymore. She had to know. She stepped into the hallway, bare feet padding against the cold linoleum. The building was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. At the end of the corridor stood the staircase leading to the 4th floor, the condemned unit. The door at the top of the stairs was sealed with rusted chains and a heavy padlock. A no-entry sign hung crookedly, its letters faded with age. Sarah's heart pounded as she climbed the stairs, every step groaning beneath her weight. When she reached the door, she pressed her ear against it. At first, nothing. Only the sound of her own shallow breaths. Then, tap, tap, tap. Right on the other side. She stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped her phone. The next morning, Sarah confronted Mr. Jenkins again. "There's something up there. I heard it myself. The chains are rattling, someone is knocking from inside." The landlord's face went pale. He avoided her eyes. "You don't understand. That unit was sealed for a reason. A man died up there. Alone. Nobody found him for weeks." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" Jenkins lowered his voice. "They say he never left." That night, Sarah made a choice she knew she'd regret. She returned to the chain door, this time with a crowbar she'd borrowed from work. Her hands trembled as she wedged it under the lock. The metal groaned, snapping free after a final violent tug. The chains clattered to the floor. The door creaked open. And what she saw inside froze her blood cold. The unit was ruined. The ceiling sagged, plaster crumbling. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, coated in years of dust. But the strangest part was the mattress in the corner. It wasn't old. It wasn't dusty. It was fresh. And on it were footprints, leading away from the bed, straight toward the door where Sarah stood. The upstairs apartment wasn't empty. It had never been empty. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her flashlight beam trembling across the ruined apartment. Every instinct told her to run, to slam the door, chain it shut, and never come back. But curiosity and fear pulled her inside. The footprints on the mattress led across the cracked linoleum floor. They were bare, human, but they didn't look fresh. They looked damp, as if the person who made them had just climbed out of water. Her heart hammered as she followed the trail, each step echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. The air grew colder the deeper she went. Her breath puffed out in faint white clouds, despite the summer heat outside. Then she heard it. A whisper. Soft. Hissing. Her name. Sarah. She froze, flashlight beam darting wildly across the room. Nothing. Empty shadows, crumbling walls. The trail of footprints ended at a closet door. Its paint was peeling, the handle rusted. Sarah swallowed hard, her hand trembling as she reached out. The whisper came again. Closer. Sarah. Her chest tightened as she yanked the door open. Inside, nothing but darkness. But the smell, rotting, damp, suffocating. She lifted the flashlight, shining it upward. Scrawled across the inside walls of the closet, written in something dark and smeared, were words. Don't let him out. Her breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over debris. Then, the floor above her creaked. Except there was no floor above her. This was the top apartment. Her blood ran cold. Something was here. With her. Sarah whipped the flashlight toward the sound. For a split second, she saw it. A figure. Tall. Gaunt. Its skin pale and wet, eyes sunk in black pits. Standing in the corner, watching her. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Sarah staggered backward, her pulse racing. She bolted for the door, slamming it behind her, her breath ragged. She fumbled with the chains, wrapping them back around the frame as fast as she could. When the final lock snapped shut, she collapsed against the wall, tears burning her eyes. But just as she thought she was safe, 3 slow knocks came from the other side. Knock. 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 Followed by a whisper, drawn out, almost mocking. Sarah. The tenant upstairs wasn't just watching her. He was waiting. And now, he knew her name. Sarah barely slept after chaining the door shut again. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the whisper, felt the knocks vibrating through the walls. By morning, she was pale, trembling, and certain of one thing. If she didn't get out, she wouldn't survive another night in that apartment. Sarah called the landlord again, demanding answers. Who was he? The man who died up there. Mr. Jenkins sighed, his face grim. His name was Daniel Cross. Lived here alone. No family. No friends. People said he was strange. Always pacing, always knocking on the floor. Then one night, he just disappeared. By the time we checked, the smell led us to him. He'd been dead for weeks. Sarah's voice cracked. So if he's dead, what's up there now? The landlord's silence said everything. That night, Sarah packed her things. She planned to leave before sunrise. But as she zipped her last suitcase, the ceiling above her groaned. Then came the knocking. 3 knocks. Directly over her head. Her lamp flickered, plunging the room into darkness. And then, the sound of scratching. Fingers dragging across the ceiling, moving toward the vent above her bed. Sarah's breath hitched as the vent cover rattled. Slowly, the screws began to turn on their own, squealing as if unseen hands were twisting them loose. The cover clattered to the floor. Two pale hands gripped the vent's edge. And a face, sunken, hollow-eyed, skin wet and gray, peered down at her. It smiled. Sarah screamed, bolting for the door. She yanked it open, only to see the hallway stretching impossibly long, the lights flickering, shadows darting along the walls. She ran, suitcase forgotten, feet pounding against the floor. Behind her, the ceiling above cracked and splintered as something heavy crawled inside the walls. It was following her. She burst into the stairwell, racing downward as the pounding grew louder, closer, echoing through the pipes and vents. When she reached the front door of the building, she threw it open and stumbled out into the street, gasping for air under the glow of a flickering street lamp. The city was alive around her. Cars. Voices. Life. But behind her, in the dark windows of the apartment building, she saw it. A pale face pressed against the glass of the fourth floor. Watching. Knocking slowly against the window. Knock. 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 Sarah never went back for her things. She never set foot in that building again. But the neighbors say the knocking never stopped. And if you walk past that street at night, you can still hear it. Knock. 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 This is the end of story 2. So story 3. When Emily and her husband Mark moved into their new suburban townhouse in Ohio, everything seemed perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, the lawns were tidy, and the neighbors were friendly. Except for one thing. The house right next to theirs. It had been vacant for years, its windows dark, blinds always drawn. Until one rainy evening, a moving van pulled into the driveway. Emily watched from her window as a man and woman stepped out. They were tall, pale, dressed in black coats despite the summer heat. What unsettled her wasn't their clothing, it was the way they moved. Too slow. Too deliberate. The couple didn't speak to the movers, didn't carry boxes, didn't smile. They just stood there, watching. When Emily waved politely, neither of them waved back. Their heads turned in perfect unison, their blank eyes fixed on her window. That night, Emily told Mark what she saw. They didn't blink, Mark. They just stood there, staring at me. Mark laughed it off. They're probably just shy. We'll meet them soon enough. But Emily couldn't shake the chill that ran down her spine when she remembered their faces. Later, as she lay in bed, the sound of soft knocking echoed through the thin walls. Knock. 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 3 taps. Perfectly spaced. She nudged Mark awake. Do you hear that? He frowned, listening. The knocking stopped. The next morning, Emily spotted the couple again. They were standing in their yard, still in the same black coats, staring at her house. No gardening. No unpacking. Just watching. And when she tried to wave again, this time they smiled. But their smiles stretched too wide. Too wrong. From the very first night, Emily knew. Something wasn't right about the couple next door. And soon, she would learn just how dangerous they really were. The following nights grew worse. Every evening, after the lights went out, Emily heard it. The faint, deliberate sound of footsteps inside the walls. Not mice. Not pipes. Footsteps. Thump, drag, thump. Mark dismissed it again. You're just stressed from the move. I'll check the attic tomorrow. But Emily wasn't imagining it. The sounds grew louder each night, as if something was crawling closer. Then came the whispering. Low, distorted voices, murmuring through the vents. Not words she could understand, but a language that made her skin crawl. One night, unable to take it any longer, she pressed her ear against the living room wall. The whisper stopped. And then, a knock. From the other side. Knock. 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 Emily jolted back, gasping. She turned off every light and peeked through the curtains. There they were. The couple. Standing in their yard. Still. Silent. staring up at her window. And this time, they weren't alone. Emily's blood ran cold as she realized more figures were gathering in the shadows behind them. Pale faces. Blank stares. Silent as stone. Emily slammed the curtains shut and shook Mark awake. "They're outside. They're watching us." Mark groaned, rubbing his eyes. But when he looked through the window, the yard was empty. You need sleep. There's nobody there." But she knew what she saw. And deep down, she knew it was only going to get worse. The couple next door weren't just neighbors. They were already inside. It was just after 3 a.m. when Emily woke with a start. The sound was unmistakable this time. Not in the walls. Not outside. Inside the house. Click. The faint creak of a door hinge downstairs. Her heart pounded as she shook Mark awake, whispering frantically, "Mark, someone's in the house." He grabbed the baseball bat he kept under the bed and crept toward the stairs, his knuckles white. Emily followed, clutching her phone, the screen's glow shaking in her trembling hands. From the living room came the sound of soft breathing. Slow. Heavy. Like someone standing completely still, waiting. Mark raised the bat, flicked on the light. The room was empty. No broken windows. No forced entry. But the front door was wide open. A chill swept through the room. Emily's breath caught in her throat as her eyes moved toward the hallway mirror. Because in the reflection, she saw them. The couple. Standing silently behind her and Mark. She spun around. But the hallway was empty. The mirror, however, still showed them standing there, smiling, their mouths slowly opening wider and wider until their faces split unnaturally. Mark grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. Now." They ran for the door, slamming it shut behind them, hearts racing. But just as Emily turned back, the pale couple was standing in their driveway. Waiting. It didn't matter where Emily and Mark went. The couple was always there. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. Emily and Mark fled to a motel on the edge of town, convinced distance would keep them safe. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a flicker of relief as she locked the door and pulled the curtain shut. But at 2 a.m., she woke to the sound. 3 knocks. Soft. Steady. At the motel door. Knock. 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 Mark grabbed the bat again, his face pale. He peeked through the peephole. Nobody was there. But when Emily glanced at the thin motel curtains, 2 tall, pale silhouettes stood outside the window. She screamed, stumbling back as the glass rattled violently, as if pressed from the outside. They fled again, this time to Emily's sister's house in another city. For days, things were quiet. Too quiet. Until one morning, her sister called from the kitchen. "Emily, who are the people in your yard?" Emily froze, dread washing over her. She looked outside. There they were. The couple. Standing perfectly still in the middle of the lawn, smiling up at the house. And now, there were more of them. Dozens. Pale, silent faces gathering one by one. Mark gripped Emily's hand tightly. His voice cracked. "They're not neighbors, Emily. They're not even people." The figures began moving closer, in perfect unison, their footsteps soft but heavy against the grass. Emily screamed as the windows shook, the doors rattled, the walls filled with whispers. The pale faces pressed against every opening. Smiling. The last thing Emily remembered was the sound of knocking. Not just on the door this time. On every wall. Every window. Every surface. Knock. 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 As if the house itself was surrounded. Consumed. The couple next door didn't just move into the neighborhood. They bring the neighborhood with them. And once they've chosen you, you can't escape.